Hello, welcome to the new episode of Talk with One, a leadership podcast. My name is Juan. I'm the host for this episode. Today, we have a guest from Taiwan, and the first time we met is in a conference in Japan, Osaka. And the conference is about facilitation. I had attended his workshop. We met again next year, 2019, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, for the same conference on facilitation. He is my teacher, mentor. Not only he is a facilitator, he is also a organization transformational consultant. He has designed process for teams and leaders in various cultural settings for over 20 years. He's currently the director of the Institute of Cultural Affairs Taiwan. Short name is ICA Taiwan. ICA is about empowering true methods and value for an authentic and sustainable transformation of individuals. And ICA is also a network of national, not-for-profit member organizations that focus on and support the human factors in all segments of society. I'm very proud to introduce the guest for today, Larry Filbro. Larry,
Good morning, Juan. How are you?
good morning. Welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here.
Besides what I have shared with the audience and the listener, is it there's one thing you would like us to know about you that I have not shared?
Well, actually, it's a little bit of a correction on what you shared. I have worked in organizational development and continue to work in organizational development, but I try not to use the word consultant
Okay.
because there are others who are truly consultants who are advising based on their skill set about how organizations should change.
Mm-hmm.
My task with organizations that I'm involved with that are changing is to facilitate their dialogue and discovery so that they can make the changes that they wish to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a subtle difference, but for me, an important one.
Thank you for the clarification. I can sense that the focus of your work is about helping others to change.
Yes, it's about helping others. It's helping others recognize the changes that they intend to make, but also the consequences of some of those changes.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, as change evolves, that they maintain attention. Actually, that's what a little bit of what we're going to talk about today
Mm-hmm.
is this whole piece of how much awareness can I bring to myself in this situation, and how much can I help eat my team or my clients or whatever to bring their own awareness to what they're
Mm.
doing, because it's not just what we think, it's also what we do, but then it's also what we learn from both of those.
Mm. I think you said awareness. Maybe share a bit. What does it mean?
So awareness is, I guess it's one of these things that's like an onion, and there are layers of awareness. In other words, we all pay attention to certain aspects of what's going on, but we also miss a lot of what's going on because we've determined what we need to see or feel or hear, and therefore we filter out other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of what awareness is about is just understanding what I'm noticing in this moment. I'm in Taiwan. You asked me when a little before we started the call, what's the weather? And I realized I have no awareness of the weather right now. I read a note last night about it, but I haven't really paid attention. I haven't looked out the window. Well, that's what awareness is. What am I being aware of right now? And that's what I'm focused on. But also, as I step deeper or back, depending on how you want to interpret it, how do I add to that momentary awareness? How do I add to that my understanding or awareness of other aspects of what's going on? So, for example, my awareness of my intention in a situation is one thing. My awareness of my action is another thing. My awareness of my impact is a third piece. Am I aware of all three of those? And then once I'm aware, is what I was intending also happening? In other words, I intended to do something nice for somebody. Is the doing, did that work? That's secondly, did the experience that they have was nice for them? Because that was my intention, but that doesn't mean that's what. So awareness is being able to add all those different layers, as many different layers as I can, so that I'm able to see more completely what's happening in the moment.
I think you have shared quite a bit about awareness. And it's not just about the information we receive from the five senses, it's also awareness of others in the same situation.
Absolutely.
And
The awareness that others may not be in the same situation. In other words, that I'm in this situation, this is my interpretation of the situation, but you may be in the same place in the same moment with me and actually be in a very different situation. Because your life experience has been different, because your intention in this moment is different, lots of things. So part of my awareness is, okay, are other people having the same experience? Are other people having the same experience of this moment I'm having? And if they are, that's good. I mean, that's interesting. If they're not, that's also interesting. But am I aware of the similarity? Am I aware of the distinction? Is always the first question. Because if I'm not aware, I can't deal with it. I can't make a different choice. And this is the primary question about awareness: is if I'm blind to what's happening, if I don't see it, literally don't see it, it's very difficult for me to react to it, to care for it, etc.
From what you say, I sense that there is one challenge. Do you see it?
Oh, there are lots of different challenges in that, and about my awareness. There are lots of the first challenge is simply I cannot possibly be aware of everything. That's an impossibility. If I try to do that, I overwhelm myself. So I do have to filter. I do have to sort. So the first question with awareness is that I can't see everything. I can't be aware of it. So what filters do I have? And am I aware of my filters? Am I challenging my filters? So this is the first challenge is, am I able to be aware and to challenge my own filters?
Yes.
Because if I can, then I have the possibility of being aware of things that normally I'm not noticing, I'm not seeing. And there are lots of different ways this shows up, but I'm a relatively old white American male. So as I go through my life, there are certain social responses to me that I'm not conscious of unless I intentionally bring my awareness. In other words, that I can walk into a situation and people assume things about me that they may not assume about somebody else. And so my life can therefore most of the time be easier but it's not because people are walking around thinking, how do I make Larry's life easy? It's because there are just certain social patterns that assume I'm not breaking the law, that I'm not doing bad things, that I'm not doing this, I'm not. So therefore, I get the benefit of the doubt. If I accidentally push somebody, they experience that as accidentally me pushing them, not I'm a young, brisk man who just decided to muscle his way in. That's not their immediate interpretation. Their immediate interpretation, this is a nice old guy who accidentally hit me. So guess what? That gives me a lot of advantage, but it's mostly unconscious advantage, unless I'm aware of it.
So we talked quite a bit about awareness, and it seems that besides the collective awareness, we also colored by our own experience.
Absolutely.
And also sometimes the assumption from the cultural context.
Completely. Every culture has its own framework. Now, the other thing but culture is a really messy category because we tend to blame culture for a lot of things that may or may not be cultural. But because cultural, one of my friends, colleague that I worked with in the UN Appreciative Leadership Program, he put cultural awareness as part of the emotional intelligence frame. You know, that emotional intelligence is about self-awareness, it's about collective awareness, and it's about cultural awareness. And I found that a very interesting way to approach culture. It's a very different framework than most of the time we approach culture from the assumption that it's an all-encompassing thing. Whereas this is saying it's just like emotion, it's a natural filter, but it's a natural filter. And so therefore it's going to be stronger or weaker based on our own practice, our own awareness. But yes, culture is absolutely one of the dominant filters. I've worked in Asia. I've lived in Taiwan for 30 years. I've worked in Asia over 40. And each Asian culture is different. You're from Singapore. Singapore is tremendously culturally different from other cultures, although there's overlap with Chinese culture, there's overlap with Malaysian culture, there's overlap with Indonesian culture. So you can see the impact of those other cultures on Singapore, but Singapore is Singapore. And so it's got a little more assertiveness, a little more drive, a little more this, a little more that. And so is that a cultural filter? Absolutely. But is it also been created over time, and therefore it's not simply a Chinese filter or not simply a, and so that's part of why culture is so fascinating.
Yes. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and understanding about awareness. We have talked about this topic quite broadly. And this podcast is about leadership. And I'm aware you're also a director for ICI Taiwan. How do you see awareness in the leadership?
Well, my opinion is all great leaders have a level of awareness that allows them to self-correct, that allows them to challenge others, that in other words, they have developed in different ways for different leaders, but they've developed the ability to pay attention. And therefore they have an awareness, and then they have opinions about what, now that they're aware, they have opinions about what could be or what should be or what might be. And then their task as leaders is to support others to begin to have either their own discernment or to have awareness of what they could be and could do. So awareness, and so this is the first level of leadership. The first level of leadership is, am I aware? of my role? Am I aware of my responsibility? Am I aware of my impact?
Mm.
So I grew up in the ICA. So I'm an ICA director in Taiwan, but I've also been with ICA for a long time, and I've worked with people all over the world. So I'm aware that when I do things, it's not just the director of ICA Taiwan speaking. It's also, I've been the teacher for many people around the world. I've been peers with many people around the world. And so as I'm speaking to them, they have not just the structural relationship of director ICA Taiwan to another director. They also have the personal relationship of they have known me and know my behavior and my action for a long time. And that changes how they relate to my response to my, and so I need to be aware that that's also then part of my responsibility. Years ago, I was working in Africa and I went to a board meeting in Kenya and I made a statement and they said, okay, Larry says that's a good idea. Let's do it. And I said, wait a minute. That's just because I said it doesn't mean it's a good idea. You need to think. We need to push back a little bit. Just because you like me and I like you and we're friends and all this, as leaders, we have to add this other piece of challenging each other, of exploring with each other, is not just because it's your idea, but is it the best way to move forward?
Mm.
And so this, I think, is where leadership and the challenge of leadership first is awareness, but also awareness, not just of what I'm doing, but what is the impact of what I do on other people? How are they taking what I do
Mm.
and interpreting it? And is that my intention? If not, I need to challenge not just through my behavior, but through other things.
Yes. Let me summarize what you share. You say about the role of leadership to help people to understand, to be aware, and you raise a specific situation where if the leader has other roles, like being a teacher, peers, and that may also kind of like add additional filter for this collective awareness.
Yes.
And actually, I'm curious. I'm actually start to understand what push you to be very conscious of yourself because of not only your role, your nationality and your personality, you're also very aware how you impact others. And I'm curious what is behind all this self-awareness.
My life. Uh, because of, as a facilitator, your task is to help others reflect,
Mm-hmm.
to help others pay attention, to help others. And so if you're going to facilitate, you need to self reflect, to self manage, to self. And so one aspect is simply that aspect. Another aspect is as an expat working all over the world, it is really critical for me to recognize there are situations that I get into where I'm getting an opportunity or a permission or whatever simply because I'm an expat. It has nothing to do with am I really competent for it or not? Maybe. But it has to do with I get more opportunity, I get more this, more that because I'm in that opportunity. So if I'm going to take that on responsibly, I need to up my awareness. I need to up my game, so to speak, to qualify for what people are inviting me into. So, for example, facilitation. When I first started facilitating intentionally or consciously or whatever, a lot was when I was in India. I was 23 years old. So basically, I was a high school kid, a college kid, suddenly working in community development context in India, having a great time, but also feeling great responsibility for what I was doing with facilitating community conversations. But I also meant I got the first year we were working on facilitation consciously with planning in these communities, I probably facilitated 200 days that year. Nobody gets a chance to facilitate that much. It, I mean, when you're not charging and you're showing up to facilitate a community, it's easier to get programmed. But the fact is, we were doing way beyond what anybody else. So therefore, for me, it was okay, you got this responsibility. You've agreed to facilitate 200 days every year. You better get good at it. And so I practiced and I worked and I paid attention and I did all these kind of stuff. And so I had all that experience. But would I have had that same experience if I'd not been an expat in India? No. Why? Because if I'd been back in America, being a regular facilitator person in the ICA, I may have done 25 days that year. If I was, an Indian in India, I might have done 50 days a year. But because I was an expat, I was put in all these other opportunities. Anyway, you see what I mean? And so
yes.
in our lives, there are different opportunities that come up for different reasons. Do we pay attention and use those opportunities, respect the fact that they are an opportunity, and use them effectively to develop ourselves?
From what you share, I sense that you are highly aware that you become the expert because of course, your skills and where you come from, and probably how others see you.
Absolutely. And I mean, I also like to do stuff. So therefore, I put myself in the way of a lot of things. So I also recognize it's not that I'm only a product of other people's behavior. It's also my own behavior. And so I need to recognize that it's also, there were other people who had the same opportunity who didn't use it the same way. And so, this is one of the difficulties we get into these kinds of analysis, is we want to say, well, it's this, that was the factor that made everything. Yeah, and no. As a leader, there are multiple factors affecting, and as a person, there are multiple factors affecting. The question is, are you aware of all the different factors? And then do you bring your intention to that so that you can use it to the best of your ability and to be the best service to the people that you're trying to work with? And so therefore, if you do that, then your learning opportunities expand exponentially. If you don't do that, then you're limited to what other people are offering. And even that you may not take up because you're not confident because of this, that, or the other thing. And so it's a combination of all these different factors. So I've been tremendously lucky. And I'm very lucky that my parents trained me to work hard all the time and, assume I'm a workaholic, and to assume that being a workaholic is a balanced lifestyle and things like that, even though it may or may not be. So,
yes, this example is vividly demonstrated to this podcast. This is recorded in January 4th, 2022. I think you are a very few person who start the engine.
That was one of the things. We're starting a training tonight, regional training. So we have people from actually 14 countries in a facilitator training session starting tonight. And I got a note from one of the other trainers. usually the first week is when you're thinking about the training. You're not doing the training.
Yes.
So I sent back a note saying, actually, I didn't think about that. It never occurred to me not,
Yes,
because
yes.
I want to help the group continue their journey, and this is the earliest we could put it in, and so that's why I wanted to do it.
Yeah, it's like so far we talked quite a bit about awareness, and there's another word you bring in this conversation, intention. I think you said that you put yourself when the opportunity present themselves, and share with us what do you see the challenge in the leadership relationship with intention.
Okay, so intention is where we all have a lot of intention about a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes my intention is to not do anything. So my intention is avoidance. Sometimes my intention is service. Sometimes my intention is learning. Sometimes, so there are lots of different intentions, and often in the same situation, they will be stacked up on each other. But the relationship to awareness is, first of all, am I aware of my intentions that are operating? Am I owning the intention that I'm putting into a situation? Because often I don't, or we don't. We're unconscious that particularly if they're intentions that we may not be particularly proud of, but it can also be intentions that yeah, I have. Once you say, was that your intention? Oh yeah, that was my intention. I wasn't aware that it was my intention, but now that you ask the question, yes, that was and so like, I was doing a facilitator training and here in Taiwan a couple months ago. And in Taiwan, when there's the garbage structure is when the garbage truck comes, you have to take your trash to the truck.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear the music, you go. That's the system. And we were doing a program at a small sort of a meditative center. And so they had no trash saving capability. And this was Saturday. And so the only way to get the trash out was if we took it at 4:00 in the afternoon during the program. So one of my colleagues was up facilitating. And so at 4:00, I hear the music. I jump up, grab the trash, and go out and take out the trash and give it to the trash truck. And the person that I was with said, "How can you do that?" And I said, "What do you mean, how can I do that?" She said, "You're the lead trainer. How can you be the one who takes out the trash?" And I said, "But that's what it means to be the lead trainer. To be the lead facilitator is you do whatever needs to be done to help the program succeed. And if that means you take out the trash, you take out the trash. If that means you clean the toilet, you clean the toilet. If that means you stand up front with a tie on, then you stand up front with a tie on. But the reason why is because your task is to make sure the training happens, to make sure the facilitation succeeds. That's your job. Your job is not to protect your reputation of being a non-trash person or whatever. Your job is to help the thing succeed." So was that my intention to give her that message about what our role was? Because she's a trainee trainer. Not particularly. My intention was to get the trash out. But at a different level, she was absolutely right. Yes, my intention was to demonstrate with my behavior what I mean by service, to demonstrate with my behavior what I mean by the role of trainer or the role of facilitator. So that was my intention, but it wasn't because I stopped and thought about it as being my intention. It was simply That's part. So this is the intention piece is always complex. But the first question is, are you even aware? Are
Yeah.
you even aware that that intention was affecting you in that moment?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now that's a noble intention. I also have not so noble intentions, like I don't like to do something, and so I'm trying to figure out a way to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a human being. I avoid things too. So then, do I tell people my intention of doing something on this day or that day is because that gives me an excuse not to do something else? No. But am I aware so that I own my intention? That's the first question. Second question is, if it's not a noble intention, can I help myself let it go? Can I help myself change my intentions in the future? But the first is, you can't do that unless you're aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Evelyn, my wife, often says, "You think you're a really nice guy, but often you are not." Because you do things to people because you have other reasons, other intentions. But an unintended consequence is it makes their lives more difficult. And that doesn't mean it's your intention, but it does mean there's a consequence there that you need to be conscious of. And so then my first response, of course, is denial. But then my second response is, okay, she's right. How do I bring that to my awareness? Again, I still may do the same thing, but do I bring it to my awareness so that I can make that choice? One of the
Mm-hmm.
leaders, one of the leaders I was working with a while ago was a really smart guy.
Mm.
And I said to him one day, I said, "You asked me to assess your one down." And so we've done some facilitation training, we've done some mentoring pieces and stuff. Now, my first question is, what is your intention as a leader?
Mm-hmm.
Is your intention to be right, or is your intention to help them develop as leaders? And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're almost always the smartest guy in the room.
Mm.
Therefore, your leadership team knows that no matter how hard they work, you will have a better idea. So their tendency is to give you less good ideas, knowing you will clean them up.
Mm.
If that's your intention to always be right, then you have a great system. If, on the other hand, your intention is to actually have them develop as a leader, could you change your question to what would be the worst case if we do it this way? In other words, if I don't make a suggestion to make it 5% better or 2% better, what will be the consequence? So that they know that their proposal is actually going to be what we do unless they really screw up. And so he went to work on this. And over the next year, his next level down, guess what? More than half of them got promotions because now they were really having to do their job. They couldn't just depend on him to do it for them. But that was not his intention consciously, but it was an unintended consequence of his intention of always being right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I really appreciate your sharing this story. Is the leader not only need to be aware, also need to be clear on, I would say, where he or she would like to focus on. And I do have a bit of maybe sensitive question. What helped you to be on the positive side of intention and not indulge on some, I would say, negative behavior?
Well, the first one is simply comes back to the old thing of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm aware that I had a negative intention or that the consequence of my intention was negative, that's the first defense against that happening again.
Mm.
Okay. The first defense is awareness. because if I'm aware, then I say, okay, that was an unintended consequence, or it wasn't whatever. How can I behave next time in a way that won't have that consequence? Is it possible? Sometimes it's not. So then I have to live with the consequence, but often it is. Like his case, the leader's case, where he was always being right, he could still figure out the best plan. He just had a choice whether to share it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But it wasn't that he didn't need to do that. He still could do that if he felt the need, but he didn't have to share it. He could hold on to it until a later date or whatever if it was needed. So this is the first piece. The first piece is just simply awareness. This is my negative intention. This is my negative pattern. This is my negative. If I want to have that be different, what can I do? But first, I have to be aware that it exists at all. And because most of our negative patterns that we struggle with didn't start out negative. They started out positive. And then over time, in certain situations, they have become negative. And so am I aware of that? So one of my clients used the language, said there are different kinds of issues. The issues you most have to be concerned with are fatal flaws. These are things that if you don't deal with that, you will die.
Mm.
So you need to be aware that you have a fatal flaw, then you need to deal with it. Otherwise, most of our other issues will tend to be overstrength or whatever. And so we need to be aware, this is not like this guy, the leader, was not a weakness. It was an overstrength. He was so smart that it was blocking other people's learning. So this often happens. One of my struggles is talking. I talk too much. As a facilitator, that's not necessarily the most helpful practice. And so, but part of the reason I do it is I'm articulate, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not that I shouldn't do it. It's that I should control how much I do it.
Mm.
And so that's a struggle, but it's a conscious struggle.
Yes, yes. I really appreciate what you share. We have talked close to 40 minutes. What I learned about this session is how awareness influences our behavior and the relationship between intention and awareness. Is there any message that you want to share with our audience and listeners?
I think that our task is, as leaders, but also as people, is to build our own awareness of our reality and our intention, but also to help ourselves connect with others so that we're aware of their reality and their intention, which we're in a time in which most of the time, many people, what's the right word? Often I'm putting intention on you. You do something, and then I say, you're doing that because you're evil. And it may be true, but it also may not be true. And so I need to bring my awareness of myself and my intention out. And then I also need to invite you to bring your awareness of yourself and your intention out so that we can see the awareness and the intention, even if we disagree. Being aware of what it really is to the other person changes everything.
Mm. So what I gather is the leader not only develop himself or herself, it's also about helping others to up their game.
There was somebody I was reading recently who was talking about evidence of good leadership is how many people beneath you move up and how many peers support you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas our old metaphor for leadership, you were looking for how much are you in control or how much are you leading up here and everybody else is following.
Mm-hmm.
But it's changing the criteria.
Mm.
Saying the criteria is actually how good are you at collective leadership, not just self leadership.
Yes. And I think your message is relevant and important, especially in this time of highly uncertainty and also many changes. In and we are coming quite too close to the end of our conversation, and you have been in your role or industry. I think you said more than 20 over years and maybe close to 30 years. And is there any breakthrough you are aiming for in the next stage of your career?
Well, in my work, there's always we're always looking for, what is the next iteration? What is the next transformation that's taking place? The two areas that I'm working in right now, well, three that I'm working in most consciously. One is what we were just talking about, the whole thing of how do we bring into social dialogue the ability to be authentic and honest with each other without it always requiring a decision. That we can, how do we create a context for understanding so that the level of respect can raise and then eventually decisions, but first just understanding. Second is, in terms of organizations, is to work with them on the next iteration of strategic thinking, which has to do with agility, has to do with collective thinking and individual responsibility. And so that's another area that I'm working with. And the third is because I'm getting older, is
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing of how do I transfer to the next generation so I can, go read books and watch the world go by. I don't think I'll actually do that, but that's that. I this year I got my last year I got my CPF emeritus from the International Association of Facilitators. And one of the things in there is you're saying, well, I'm pretty much done with my active. Now I'm moving into the learning, debriefing, reflecting piece. And so, what does that look like to be an elder?
Well said, Larry. I think you have not only teach all of us, you also have been leader as an example and helping us to grow and to say. And I also appreciate you share your message, taking time on this uh, Tuesday morning to spend some time with me and the audience. I really appreciate your effort and your awareness. Thank you.
Well, thank you and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.